Okay, at this point, we're going to remove the charcoal canister. That's this guy right here. This isn't something that's being removed permanently or relocated. It's actually going to stay right here. But for dealing with the fuel lines, so these right here are the fuel lines. For dealing with these, you're going to want this guy out of the way. And then that's for marking up to see where you're going to cut, as well as actually pulling the fuel lines out. You're going to want to have this out of the way. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Alright, so to remove these connectors onto the charcoal canister, we're going to start with this one. So if you see this green part right here, all you have to do is take your fingers on either side at the top and push the little tabs in, and then start pushing down. You'll have this whole bit right here come out. And this is now loose, and you can disconnect. So it took a little extra force, but was able to disconnect this guy. So I'm going to leave it on the lip. Right now, I'm going to take one of these little glove fingers that I pulled off. I'm going to just put that over this. For this larger one, I might just use with this full inside-out glove. But I'm going to move this hose clamp up. And then let's see how hard this one is to get off. Okay, so that one's nice and covered. Since this one gets in the way of, the electrical connector gets in the way of this, I'm going to go ahead and do the electrical connector next. I kind of already got this one started, because it's a bit difficult, but essentially you can see on this side there's a little push tab. You have to push that in rather hard and then just start wiggling this guy. So push it in and start wiggling it. Eventually you'll be able to get it to come off. I don't know how well you can see this, but if you look at it from the angle where there's these like openings, you'll see on this side there's two little like tabs that get caught on a lip here. I've actually already moved mine past it, but what I did on mine is I got this little pick and I put it in here and gently pried up those tabs so they're underneath the lip. You pry them to the sides and then just slowly kind of wiggle this guy off. After you get those tabs pulled up, then you can just start wiggling it off. There's 3 bolts, 2 here on this side, and then 1 on this side, and then a little thing that looks like we'll have to pinch some tabs in. So let me get the tool to get that started. Okay, so the socket size you'll want to use is a 12. So I'm going to just kind of loosen these up a bit. Didn't take too much force to release it. There we go. So yeah, if you just push one of them and pull that side up, it'll hold it for you. And with that, your charcoal canister comes right out. So I went ahead and just with some snips cut the end of the long one off so they're about the same length and kind of bent it inward, and did that on both sides. Went ahead and hung the 2 U-bolts on this cross member. These are what the front side of the tank will connect to. Charcoal canister out of the way. We're going to go ahead and move the auxiliary tank up in here, and you're going to get the large T for filling up. You're going to line it up with this area right here and try to figure out where exactly you're supposed to be cutting your fuel line. So we'll be doing that next. So before we get to actually test fitting the tank, I want to discuss the different ports that are on the tank. You can see in this picture here, I have all of the different ports set up with the hoses that are associated with them, and then kind of some labels on them. So that's kind of an overview of all of them. So moving first to the top right, here we can see the fuel gauge sender. This is pre-installed at the factory. This is pretty much the thing that'll be able to read the fuel level in your auxiliary tank and then send that signal over to your fuel gauge. You can see here there's a black wire that's attached to it. That's the ground. And then there's a little tab that doesn't have a wire attached to it. That's the positive. Okay, next here we can see the pickup to the fuel pump. I've labeled here that the way this connection works is a 5/16 elbow that then connects to the 8mm fuel hose. And then it connects to the fuel filter, and then to the fuel filter to the fuel pump, and then another 8mm hose to the inlet on the large T. It's a 5/16 by 1/8 straight piece, and then this uses 1/4 hose clamps. So that one up there is the pickup to the fuel pump. Moving down from there, we have this port. This is the rollover valve. 6mm fuel hose comes off of that valve, and then that connects to the small T. All that's using 1/4 inch hose clamps, and later we'll be going over how to install that rollover valve. And then over here we have two ports. The one on the left is the fast fill port. This is the one that'll connect to the weld-in piece on the fuel neck later on. This one on the tank uses the extra brass connector that Long Range America adds. That's the 1/4 inch by 3/8 MIP. That connects to the 12mm fuel hose, and then connects to the 1/2 by 1/4 elbow, and then that screws into the piece that we welded in. And then that'll use 2 of the 1/2 inch clamps. And then to the right side is the filler inlet, so this will be the large T. You can see the configuration of the 3 short but large diameter hoses. And then 6 of the 1-inch hose clamps are used here. Then of course on the top of that large T we have the little straight 5/16 by 1/8 straight connector that comes from the fuel pump. And I'll have a diagram that shows this a little better. For the stage of test fitting the tank, what we're going to want to connect is just the red hose that connects to the large T, and that's it. So those will be the only pieces we'll be throwing on the tank for this test fit. And again, for those large hoses, you only want the red one, and that's the one between the tank and the T. And then that way we can see exactly where that T goes on the factory fill lines for cutting. And that's the entire point of this test fitting. Is one, to see where this T needs to fit in, and you know exactly for your setup where that T is going to land, because there's not too much adjustment room for this. And then also to make sure that you've cut out everything that you need to cut out in the cutting phase. And then that way you'll see that your tank actually fits properly. So that's the goal of this test fit phase. So I ended up borrowing a little hydraulic lift table. So I used that to get the tank placed for test fitting up underneath the vehicle. At this point, I pan the camera over how the tank fits up on my test fit. During my test fit, you'll notice that I don't have the exhaust bracket cut off that cross rail. This is the point that I realized that I needed to do that, so that's why that's still there. Something else you might notice is my exhaust has changed during the install. The reason for this isn't because of the tank fitting, actually, is because I'd been planning on going from a Gibson exhaust to, a Borla exhaust to a MagnaFlow Overland. so I just happened to swap it out at this point. But yeah, so that's kind of the gap. That bracket that I didn't cut out is kind of pushing things to one side a little bit, so it's not a perfect fit at this point. I went ahead and cut that out and then retest fit later, but I didn't film it. Here you can see how that T fits up against the factory fuel line. You can see at some point too, I was wiggling it, so it's pretty yeah, like right here, I'm wiggling it. It's, you know, really doesn't move much off of that hose connection to the tank, so you really got to match this up well. But during the testing phase, you just take a marker and kind of mark where that T fits up in there, and that'll give you an idea of where you'd expect that T to land. And then your goal when cutting things is to try to cut it so that you can place that T exactly where it landed during test fitting. Okay, now that I have the tank test fitting, or the tank when I was test fitting it back out, I'll just show you where this goes in. Here's the T. Happen to have the hose on it as well, but based on my markings, it's going to fit in roughly about here, and realistically it'd be more kind of like this, because the tank's going to have it at it more like an angle like this. So that's where it fit in on mine. If you notice, there's kind of this bend right here, kind of like the corners right there. It's a little bit before that on mine. I've seen some measurements for other installs, and it seemed like they cut theirs more like right on the elbow. You have some flexibility in it because, you know, this hose here is somewhat flexible, but I think I'll probably just cut mine right where the marks are, just like this. Should be plenty of room, and then you'll have a flexible hose on this end here, on this elbow side. So you don't have to worry too much about, you know, having your hose coming up over this cross member here. So at this point, I went ahead and painted over all the places that I did cuts. So for this cross support member, I went ahead and painted over everything here. If there's anywhere, say like, you know, on my the support for my rear bumper, if there's anywhere that during the cutting process you happen to nick something, I would just go ahead and paint over it at this point as well. So of course this side, as well as the other side, get those good and painted up. Up here where we had that little guide that we cut out, just paint over that as well. And then of course the final location is right here where there's this third part on this cross piece on the frame here. Paint over that as well. So I've finished up the coating for on the frame wherever we do cuts, and I've actually switched to a 3M undercoating, just because I've used some of that stuff before, and I know whenever you put that on, like, you really don't have to worry about corrosion. As you can tell, this stuff goes on a lot thicker and more textured, but even just feeling it, you can really tell it's a lot tougher. So if you're worried about corrosion, or just, you know, really want to seal up all your cuts, that's a really good way to use it. Again, it's the 3M undercoating. You can see I've even used it up here. Used it over on this cut. On this cross member here, I've used it. And then of course for this exhaust bracket, I've also used it. Now one quick note on this section here, on this cross member, you're going to want to get the bottom cuts real close to the cross member while being careful not to, you know, gouge the cross member. The reason for this is the tank, a flat plate for, or like the mounting brackets on the tank that go up against this are going to go right here. So the flatter you have it, the more contact you'll just have with the cross member in general, unless you're wanting to keep it spaced for whatever reason. I chose to get mine close, and I think the 3M undercoating will do a good job protecting the bottom of this cross member.